A man must never expose the full extent of his plans, no matter how strong the urge to share them may be. In the early stages of a vision, that dream is vulnerable. It's like a seed beneath the soil, too delicate to survive the harshness of outside air and judgment. When a man speaks too early about what he's building, he invites opinions, doubts, and projections from others, especially from someone close who might not see the world through his lens. A man must understand that every dream requires silence in the beginning, a sacred space where only disciplined vision and quiet execution exist. Talking about plans creates a false sense of accomplishment. It tricks the brain into feeling as if something has already been done. That's the trap. The validation from others becomes the reward instead of the outcome itself. And in that moment, motivation dies. The plan begins to dissolve. The excitement weakens, words replace work. And no man should ever let his ambition be sacrificed on the altar of early praise or shallow approval. A woman may want to know everything. She may ask questions, seek clarity, and desire full transparency. But even then, a man must learn to master restraint, not to lie, not to manipulate, but to protect what is still growing. Because if he starts explaining the why, the how, and the when, he risks inviting worry, criticism, or unintended pressure. Not everyone understands the timing of greatness. Not everyone will see the mountain he's climbing or the storm he's preparing to walk through. Some things are better shown in results, not discussions. When the foundation is laid, when the walls are built, when the roof is secure, that's when others can be invited in. That's when the vision becomes strong enough to withstand scrutiny, feedback, or even celebration. But until then, silence is not only wise, it is necessary. The man must be comfortable walking alone, building alone, and trusting in his own blueprint. Plans shared too early often become targets, not just for outside forces, but for doubt within the closest circles. A well-meaning voice can easily ask, "Are you sure this will work?" And if a man isn't anchored deeply in self-belief, those words become seeds of uncertainty. They grow and take root. Suddenly, the focus shifts from doing to defending. That's a dangerous game. Energy that should be spent on progress gets wasted on explaining. Execution doesn't need commentary. Momentum doesn't need a narrator. A man who is truly about his purpose doesn't seek validation. He seeks fulfillment. He doesn't speak to impress. He moves to achieve. The power is in the surprise, in the moment when what he built speaks louder than anything he ever said. That's how respect is earned. That's how silence becomes strength. A man who guards his plans is not hiding out of fear. He's guarding what matters. He's not being secretive. He's being selective. Not everyone deserves access to the blueprint. Not everyone should know the next step, the next move, the final goal, especially when it's still in motion, especially when it's still raw and unfinished. People often judge what they don't understand. They try to reshape your dream to fit their reality. And if a man listens too closely to those voices, he will shrink his vision to match their comfort zone. He will lower his ceiling to meet their expectations. That's a loss too heavy to carry. That's regret in the making. The mission must be protected at all costs. In silence, clarity grows. In solitude, the path becomes clear. When a man keeps his plans close to his chest, he allows himself to pivot without pressure, to fail without shame, and to rise without permission. The journey becomes pure, the process becomes personal, and the reward becomes priceless. In the end, the only explanation a man should give is through results. Let the finished product speak. Let the success be the conversation. Let the outcome tell the story. Until then, he builds, he works, he endures, quietly, patiently, powerfully. A man must hide the depth of his struggles because not every battle is meant to be shared. Pain is part of the journey, but showing it openly can shift the perception of strength. The world respects resilience, not breakdowns. When a man reveals too much of his internal chaos, he risks being seen as unstable instead of strong, emotional instead of focused. The more he displays his wounds, the more others begin to doubt his leadership, his clarity, his ability to hold things together when everything is falling apart. That's not about pride. It's about positioning. Strength isn't the absence of pain, it's the ability to carry it in silence and still move forward. Every man faces moments of doubt, fear, confusion, and even despair. But if he hands those emotions over to someone else, especially someone who looks to him for security and direction, it can disrupt the balance. When the protector appears broken, those under his care feel unsafe. When the leader looks lost, the followers lose trust. A man must understand that vulnerability is real, but exposure is a choice. Not every emotion needs to be expressed. Not every dark night needs a witness. Some things must be fought in silence, behind closed doors with no applause, no comfort, no reassurance, just pure will. There will be moments when he's on the edge, when the pressure feels unbearable, when the weight of expectations almost breaks him. But even then, the right move is to retreat within, not to cry out for sympathy. That's not coldness, it's control. It's the ability to feel everything and still choose silence over weakness. It's the discipline to suffer without seeking pity, to endure without complaining. When a man cries too often in front of a woman, when he shares every insecurity, every doubt, every emotional bruise, she may comfort him at first. But over time, her view of him shifts. She begins to wonder if he can still lead, still protect, still provide that feeling of stability she instinctively seeks. This is not about being emotionless. This is about choosing what emotions deserve space and what emotions must be kept in check. A man's mind is his battlefield, and not every war fought there should be broadcast. If he loses control over his emotional state, he loses influence. Influence is not about being perfect. It's about being consistent. Emotional restraint is not suppression. It is mastery. A man who can feel deeply and still operate with clarity is a man who commands respect. When a man keeps his struggles to himself, he is not pretending to be invincible. He is preserving his energy. Every time he explains his pain, he gives it power. Every time he breaks down in front of others, he risks being remembered for the breakdown, not the breakthrough. Pain shared does not always lead to connection. Sometimes it leads to doubt. And doubt is a poison that quietly eats away at how others see him. There will be times when speaking out seems like the only relief, when bottling everything inside feels like torture. But in those moments, he must lean on purpose, not pity. He must remember that storms are not meant to be narrated. They are meant to be survived. And when the storm passes, when he stands tall again, no one needs to know how close he came to falling. They just need to see that he never stayed down. That's what builds reputation. That's what creates quiet awe. That's what makes people believe him even when they don't understand him. Some battles are sacred. Some pain is private. And some strength is forged in darkness with no one watching. That kind of strength can't be taught, can't be faked, can't be borrowed. It's earned through struggle and protected through silence. When a man learns to sit with his pain without sharing it, to cry without an audience, to bleed without seeking help, he becomes more than strong. He becomes unshakable. The depth of his struggles doesn't make him weak. It makes him real. But what he chooses to show the world and what he keeps for himself determines how far he'll rise. And in that silent decision, in that refusal to let pain define him publicly, a man protects not only his image, but his path. A man must hide the scale of his success, move because strategy exposed too early becomes strategy compromised. Every move made toward progress carries weight, risk, and timing. Sharing these moves openly, especially with a woman, may invite questions, opinions, or expectations that interfere with focus. When a man reveals his next steps before they are complete, he risks damaging the momentum that took so long to build. Plans are not always understood, and not every move needs validation. The more he shares, the more he opens the door to emotional interference, well-meaning concern, or even subtle discouragement. The journey to power requires a level of solitude that protects the mission from unnecessary distractions. There is a reason why high-level strategists operate in silence. The element of surprise is not just useful, it is vital. When others, even those closest to him, know every detail of what he's doing, they begin to form expectations. Expectations lead to pressure. Pressure leads to unnecessary compromises. What was once a focused mission can become a performance. A man must never allow his pursuit of greatness to turn into a show for someone else's comfort or applause. The work is sacred. The vision is personal. Sharing the strategy too early dilutes the intent and invites emotional noise into a logical process. There is also a psychological factor at play. When a man talks too much about what he's about to do, he gets a premature reward. The brain begins to release the same satisfaction it would if the task were already done. He feels accomplished before the real work is finished. This creates complacency. Words begin to replace execution. Confidence built on conversation, not completion, is fragile. A man must learn to delay the reward. He must embrace the quiet, where the only motivation is internal and the only proof is in progress. He owes no one an explanation until the results are undeniable. A woman may want transparency, updates, or insight into what's happening next, especially if she's emotionally or financially involved. But a man must know when to give clarity and when to hold back. The goal is not secrecy out of distrust, but silence out of strength. Some things are simply not up for discussion, not because they're shameful, but because they're still in motion. The wrong comment at the wrong time can shake confidence, create doubt, or redirect energy. And a man must protect his energy at all costs. He must preserve the mental clarity it takes to execute without interruption. Even the act of explaining can weaken the power of a move. Having to justify why something is being done invites resistance, even if unintentional. When a man breaks down his thought process too often, he risks making decisions based on someone else's understanding rather than his own conviction. Not everyone will see the value in the move until it pays off. Not everyone can grasp the long-term vision from a short-term perspective. A man must learn to live with being misunderstood, especially during the build. Greatness often looks confusing in its early stages. There is also the matter of control. When a man shares everything, he gives up control of the narrative. He allows others to form opinions, to weigh in, to ask for outcomes before the process is complete. This can create a cycle where he begins reacting to emotional feedback rather than following his original path. Control over the mission means control over the communication around it. He must be intentional about what is said, when it is said, and why it is said. Otherwise, he becomes reactive instead of proactive, led instead of leading. By keeping his success moves to himself, a man ensures he operates from a place of power, not pressure. He moves with calm precision, not emotional response. The silence protects the integrity of the plan. The secrecy sharpens the focus. And when the result arrives, it speaks louder than any explanation ever could. That is the moment when those around him understand without needing to be told. The outcome justifies the silence. Let them see the fruits, not the planting. Let them feel the impact, not the preparation. When it's time, the success will be loud enough. Until then, the work must remain silent. The mission must remain protected. And the man must remain focused. A man must keep his financial strategy silent for stability. not just for himself, but for everyone around him. Money, when talked about too openly, becomes a source of tension, judgment, and vulnerability. The way a man earns, spends, saves, or invests reflects his long-term vision. But not everyone will understand that vision, especially someone who may see money emotionally rather than strategically. If he reveals every detail of his financial plans, it invites questions he may not want to answer, opinions he didn't ask for, and pressure that wasn't there before. Money is not just about math. It's about power, control, and peace of mind. And when that control is disrupted, chaos follows. When a man openly shares his financial moves, it can create unrealistic expectations. If he's saving aggressively, he may be seen as selfish. If he's investing heavily, he may be seen as reckless. If he's spending cautiously, he may be seen as insecure. If he's taking financial risks for future rewards, someone who doesn't understand his end game may urge him to play it safe. Every comment, every suggestion, and every reaction becomes a seed of doubt. Over time, those seeds grow into hesitation. What once was a sharp, confident plan now becomes tangled with second-guessing and emotional negotiation. A man must protect his financial thinking the same way he protects his goal, with quiet discipline and strategic boundaries. Financial transparency sounds like a virtue, but for a man building something meaningful, it can become a trap. If he lays every card on the table, he gives up negotiation power. He exposes his vulnerabilities, and he opens the door for emotional manipulation. A woman who knows every detail of his bank account, his investment portfolio, or his debts might unintentionally or intentionally begin to base her behavior on that information. She may push for more spending, demand quicker results, or lose patience with delayed gratification. And when that happens, the man no longer moves based on logic or timing, he moves based on pressure. That shift is dangerous. There is a sacred difference between sharing value and sharing vulnerability. A man can be generous, supportive, and dependable without revealing the exact mechanics behind his financial system. When he keeps the strategy to himself, he maintains control over the pace of his journey. He can take bold steps without having to explain them. He can weather setbacks without looking weak. He can pivot without panic. The financial world is unstable by nature, and a man navigating it must remain emotionally grounded. Silence gives him the space to think clearly, act decisively, and recover privately. Money also influences perception. When a woman knows a man is financially strong, she may expect a lifestyle that reflects it immediately. If he holds back on spending, it might be interpreted as stinginess rather than strategy. If he shares his struggles during a tough period, it might lead to anxiety, resentment, or loss of confidence. Emotional responses to money can destroy even the most calculated plan. A man's ability to endure short-term discomfort for long-term gain requires emotional distance from outside reactions. That distance is created by keeping financial strategy private. Not every conversation needs numbers. Not every relationship needs full access to income, assets, or liabilities. A man's responsibility is to provide stability, not constant explanation. He must move in silence, adjust in silence, and grow in silence. The moment he begins explaining every move, he risks becoming reactive rather than intentional. He stops leading and starts defending. Financial leadership is about consistency, not commentary. There will be moments when sharing seems like the right thing to do. But in those moments, he must ask himself, will this information help or hurt? Will it empower or disrupt? Will it bring peace or introduce pressure? Most of the time, silence is the better choice. Not because there's something to hide, but because there's something to protect. A man's financial vision is his alone to carry. Until it's realized, it should be guarded with the same intensity as any other mission. Stability doesn't come from transparency. It comes from control. And control comes from knowing what to share and what to keep sacred.